When my son opened the door of his $2.8 million mansion and saw me standing there in a torn coat with a cardboard sign that read, "Homeless, please help," he didn't offer me the guest room. He laughed, turned to his wife, and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Call security before the old leech tries to sleep in our garage again." That single sentence cost them $5 million, and every last illusion they had about controlling my money. I stood on the marble driveway in the cold March drizzle, the cardboard sign getting soggy in my hands. My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 68 years old, and for the last 12 years, I had been the invisible checkbook that kept their lifestyle afloat. Now I was testing whether blood still meant anything when the checks stopped. Victor didn't even step outside. He stayed in the warm glow of the foyer, one hand on the doorframe, the other already reaching for his phone. His wife Kendra appeared behind him in a cream cashmere sweater I had paid for 2 Christmases ago. She folded her arms and smirked. "Mom, this is embarrassing," Victor said, voice carrying across the cul-de-sac. "We told you last month we can't keep bailing you out. Go to a shelter."
"That's what they're for."
I kept my face blank, shoulders hunched like the defeated woman they wanted to see. Inside, my pulse was steady. The tiny recorder sewn into the collar of the coat was already catching every word. Kendra leaned closer to him and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Make sure the gate camera gets this. We'll need it for the petition." A black SUV with private security on the side rolled up less than 2 minutes later. 2 uniformed men got out. One of them actually recognized me from the Christmas party I had hosted for them the year before. He hesitated. "Ma'am, you need to leave the property," he said, not unkindly. I nodded once, turned, and walked down the long driveway with the soggy sign under my arm. Behind me, I heard Victor's laugh again, sharp and satisfied, followed by Kendra's voice carrying on the night air. "Finally! Maybe now the trust will unlock faster once we prove she's lost it." I kept walking until I was out of sight, then slipped into the nondescript rental car parked 2 blocks away. The moment the door closed, I let the mask drop. My hands were perfectly still. I checked the recorder. Crystal clear. Date, time, voices, everything. That was day 1 of my experiment. 12 years earlier, after my husband Robert died, I had quietly begun helping Victor and Kendra. It started small. Their first apartment rent when Victor was still finding himself in real estate. Then the down payment on their starter home. Then the second home when the market boomed. Private school for the grandchildren I barely saw. The $180,000 kitchen remodel. The $92,000 Mercedes for Kendra's 40th. The $65,000 trip to Santorini they posted about as a much-needed reset. I never asked for thanks. I kept every transfer documented in a separate ledger my late husband's accountant had set up for me. By the time I decided to test them, the total stood at $1,872,400. Not including the $5 million irrevocable family trust Robert had created, which named Victor and Kendra as primary beneficiaries once I passed or was declared incapacitated. I had begun to notice the shift 2 years ago. Phone calls became shorter. Visits were scheduled only when they needed something. At the last family dinner, Kendra had joked in front of guests, "Margaret is our retirement plan. We just have to keep her happy until the trust kicks in." Everyone had laughed. I had smiled along, but something inside me had gone very quiet and very cold. So I created the story. I told them my investment portfolio had collapsed in a bad market move. I claimed I was down to my last $40,000 and needed help with living expenses. Their response was immediate. Stop answering my calls, change the security code on the house I had helped buy, and start whispering to friends that Mom's mind is slipping. That was when I decided to stop whispering back. I spent the next 10 days living the part. Cheap motel on the edge of town, $49 a night, cash only. I wore the same torn coat and carried the same cardboard sign near their gated community every evening at dusk. I never actually begged strangers. I simply stood where their security cameras and neighbors could see. Each night I returned to the motel, uploaded the recordings, and added new entries to my ledger. On day 4, I overheard Victor on a speakerphone call while I stood near their mailbox, pretending to look lost. "Yeah, she showed up again. We had security walk her off. Look, If we can get the guardianship petition filed before she does anything stupid with the trust, the court will freeze everything in her name and hand it to us as conservators. The lawyer says with the videos of her acting homeless, it'll be open and shut. Kendra's voice came through the speaker, crisp and pleased. Just make sure the forensic accountant we hired flags all those old transfers as possible undue influence. We can claim she was already declining when she gave us the money. I stood in the shadows and smiled for the first time in weeks. By day 9, they had escalated. Victor filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship and conservatorship, citing rapid cognitive decline evidenced by erratic financial decisions and public displays of homelessness. They attached stills from their own security footage and affidavits from 2 neighbors who had seen me with the sign. I was ready. My own attorney, Eleanor Park, had been quietly preparing since the morning after that first night on their driveway. She specializes in elder financial abuse cases. When I walked into her office wearing the torn coat and handed her the first batch of recordings, she listened without expression, then looked at me over her glasses. "Margaret, this is textbook. We're not just fighting guardianship. We're building a criminal referral." I nodded. "I want every dollar back, Eleanor, and I want the trust redirected so they never touch it." She smiled thinly. "Then we let them dig their own grave, a little deeper." The first court hearing was scheduled for April 11th. I arrived in a simple navy suit, hair neat, posture straight. Victor and Kendra swept in with their attorney, a slick man named Richard Harlan who specialized in family protection cases. They looked shocked to see me composed. The judge, an older woman named Miriam Hayes, read the petition aloud. Mr. Ellis claims his mother has exhibited signs of incapacity, including sudden withdrawal of financial support, public begging, and refusal to accept family assistance. Harlan stood. "Your Honor, we have video evidence. Mrs. Ellis has been seen wandering the streets with a cardboard sign. She has made several large, unexplained withdrawals in the past year and has cut off all contact with her only son. We believe she is being exploited by outside parties and needs immediate protection." Judge Hayes looked at me. "Mrs. Ellis, would you like to respond?" I stayed seated. "Your Honor, I would like my attorney to present our response." Eleanor rose and slid a thumb drive across the table. "We ask the court to view these recordings before ruling on temporary relief." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. The first clip played, Victor's voice loud and clear on his own driveway. "Call security before the old leech tries to sleep in our garage again." Gasps rippled through the small gallery. Kendra's face went pale. The second clip, the speakerphone conversation where they discussed accelerating the trust once I was declared incompetent. Victor shifted in his seat. "That was taken out of context." Eleanor cut in smoothly. "We also have bank records, Your Honor. Over the past 12 years, Mrs. Ellis transferred $1,872,400 to her son and daughter-in-law. Many of those transfers show signatures that forensic analysis now indicates were forged on at least 4 occasions. We have subpoenaed the full transaction history." Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Forged?" "Yes, Your Honor. We will present expert testimony. In addition, the $5 million trust created by the late Robert Ellis contains a specific clause. Any beneficiary found by clear and convincing evidence to have engaged in financial exploitation of the grantor shall be disinherited." Harlan tried to object. The judge silenced him with a look. She turned to me again. "Mrs. Ellis, did you stage this situation?" I met her eyes directly. "I did, Your Honor. After years of being treated as a walking ATM, I wanted to know exactly what kind of family I had left. The recordings and financial audit speak for themselves." The hearing was continued for 2 weeks to allow full forensic review. During those 2 weeks, Victor and Kendra's world began to crack. Their attorney advised them to settle quietly. They refused. Instead, they doubled down, leaking stories to local gossip sites claiming I had dementia and was being manipulated by a greedy lawyer. I stayed silent and kept building the file. The final hearing lasted 4 hours. Their side presented a psychiatrist they had paid to evaluate me based only on the videos. He testified that my behavior showed classic signs of frontal lobe decline. Eleanor called our expert, Dr. Alan Reeves, who had conducted a full cognitive battery on me the week before. His report was unequivocal. Mrs. Ellis possesses superior executive function for her age. No evidence of impairment. Then came the bank forensic analyst. He walked the court through wire transfers, altered documents, and a pattern of pressure that matched the recordings word for word. When Eleanor played the clip of Kendra saying, "Once she's declared incompetent, the trust money is ours to manage," the courtroom went dead quiet. Judge Hayes did not need closing arguments. She ruled from the bench. Temporary guardianship petition denied. The evidence clearly demonstrates financial exploitation and attempted undue influence. Mrs. Margaret Ellis is fully competent. The court finds by clear and convincing evidence that Victor Ellis and Kendra Ellis have engaged in elder financial exploitation. The $5 million trust is hereby modified per its original protective clause. Victor Ellis and Kendra Ellis are permanently removed as beneficiaries. The funds will be redirected to the Robert Ellis Memorial Scholarship Foundation for students pursuing financial literacy and elder rights advocacy. Any prior transfers proven fraudulent will be subject to restitution with interest. A permanent restraining order is issued. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis shall have no contact with Mrs. Margaret Ellis, direct or indirect, including through third parties. Violation will result in immediate contempt charges. Court costs and attorney fees to be paid by the petitioners. Victor looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. Kendra's perfect makeup finally cracked. A single tear carved a track through her foundation. I stood slowly, buttoned my jacket, and looked at them one last time. "You wanted me gone," I said quietly, loud enough only for them and the court reporter to hear. "Congratulations. I'm gone. And so is every dollar you thought was yours." I walked out of the courthouse into the April sunlight. Eleanor walked beside me. "Feel better?" she asked. I thought about the quiet condo I had already purchased overlooking the Pacific, the foundation papers already drawn up, the new life with no one's hand in my pocket. "I feel free," I said. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived at their address. Inside was a single sentence on heavy cream stationery. "You treated me like I was already dead. Now the money is." No signature. None needed. I never saw them again. I wake up most mornings now to the sound of the ocean instead of the sound of another emergency transfer request. I drink coffee on my balcony and watch the waves. Sometimes I visit the foundation office and read applications from young people learning how to protect their own futures. I am no longer anyone's walking ATM. I am Margaret Ellis. And for the first time in 12 years, every dollar I spend is mine, every decision is mine, and every tomorrow belongs to me alone. I never planned to become invisible, but after Robert died, that's exactly what happened inside my own family. For 12 straight years, I kept the books. Every transfer had a purpose, a receipt, and a quiet hope that one day Victor would look at me and say thank you, without the word money attached. That day never came. Let me show you the numbers, because numbers don't lie the way people do. Year 1 after Robert's funeral. Victor and Kendra's rent was $4,200 a month, and they were between opportunities. I wired $50,400 that year. They sent me a Christmas card with a printed photo of them smiling in front of the new couch I paid for. No handwritten note. Year 3. They wanted to upgrade to a better school district for the twins. I wrote the $185,000 check for the down payment on the house in Willow Creek. At closing, Kendra hugged me once, then spent the rest of the afternoon texting her friends about the granite countertops. Victor clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're the best, Mom. We'll pay you back when the market pops." The market popped. They refinanced. I never saw a dime. By year 7, the pattern was carved in stone. Every time their credit cards maxed out, every time a once-in-a-lifetime vacation came up, every time the twins needed new sports gear or Kendra decided she needed a new luxury SUV because the old one had bad energy, my phone would ring. "Mom, it's just a short-term bridge." "Mom, you know we do the same for you." "Mom, family helps family." I helped. $1,872,400 over 12 years. I have the ledger. I have the bank statements. I have the timestamps on every wire. I also have the text messages where Kendra complained to her sister that I was getting clingy, and Victor replied with a laughing emoji and the words, "She'll be gone soon enough, then it's all ours." I kept giving because I told myself love sometimes looks like silence and a cleared balance. I was wrong. The first crack in my denial came the night of their 10th anniversary party. I had paid for the caterer, the string quartet, the open bar, 200 guests. I stood in the corner holding a glass of sparkling water while Kendra told a group of friends, loud enough for me to hear, "Victor's mom is sweet, but honestly, she's like that old family car you keep in the garage. You feel guilty getting rid of it, but it's not really useful anymore." Victor laughed and added, "Yeah, but the insurance payout when it finally dies, that's going to be nice." The room laughed with them. I smiled politely, excused myself to the powder room, and stood there, staring at my reflection until the nausea passed. That was the night I started planning. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of them. I simply decided to find out, once and for all, what they would do when the old family car ran out of gas. So I created the collapse. I told them my financial advisor had made a catastrophic mistake in a leveraged options play. I claimed I had lost 90% of my liquid assets and was left with barely enough for basic living expenses. I even sent them a fake portfolio summary with red ink and declining arrows. Their response was faster than I expected. Victor called once. "Mom, that's terrible." "We'll pray for you." Then silence for 3 weeks. Kendra sent a single text. "So sorry to hear. Times are tough for everyone right now." No offer to help. No invitation to stay with them, just radio silence while they waited to see if the trust language would trigger early. That silence told me everything. I rented the cheapest motel room I could find that still had Wi-Fi. I bought the torn coat from a thrift store for $12. I made the cardboard sign myself with a black marker. And every evening at dusk, I walked the sidewalk outside their gated community, sign in hand, head down, recording every second with the discreet devices Eleanor had helped me conceal. I learned more in 10 days than I had in 10 years. I learned that Victor had already contacted the trust attorney to ask how quickly they could petition for conservatorship if I became unable to manage my affairs. I learned that Kendra had been telling her country club friends that I had early onset dementia and that they were devastated but stepping up as responsible adults. I learned that they had quietly moved $47,000 out of a joint account I still co-signed on, using a forged signature that the bank later confirmed did not match mine. And I learned that on the night I stood freezing on their driveway with security escorting me away, they opened a bottle of the $900 wine I had given them for their anniversary and toasted to freedom. The recordings were brutal, but they were gold. One clip still plays in my head on loop. Kendra's voice, bright and vicious. "Once the court freezes her accounts and appoints us, we can finally sell that ugly condo she bought last year and put the money where it belongs, in our name. She won't even notice. She's already half gone anyway." Victor answered with a chuckle. "Just make sure the lawyer emphasizes the public begging. Judges eat that up. Senile old woman wandering the streets? Perfect optics." I sat in that motel room at 2 a.m., earbuds in, listening to my own son and daughter-in-law plan my legal death, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not pain, not even anger anymore, just clarity, cold and absolute. They had already buried me. All I had to do was hand them the shovel and watch them dig deeper. By the time the emergency guardianship hearing arrived, Eleanor had assembled a file thicker than most murder cases. Forensic accountants, audio experts, bank fraud investigators, and a retired judge who reviewed the trust language and confirmed the disinheritance clause was ironclad. I walked into the courtroom that morning in the same navy suit I had worn the first day. My hair was styled. My hands were steady. Victor and Kendra sat at the petitioner's table, looking like they had already won. They had brought the twins, dressed in matching navy blazers, probably for sympathy points. The boys looked uncomfortable, eyes darting everywhere except at me. Judge Hayes called the case. Harlan began with the dramatic flair of a man who bills by the hour. He played the security footage of me on the driveway. He showed printed screenshots of me holding the sign. He called a paid psychiatrist who had never met me but was happy to diagnose clear cognitive impairment from 30 seconds of grainy video. Then Eleanor stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Your Honor, we will stipulate that Mrs. Ellis did in fact stand on that sidewalk with a cardboard sign. What we will not stipulate is that it proves incapacity. On the contrary. She pressed play. Victor's voice filled the courtroom. Call security before the old leech tries to sleep in our garage again. Kendra's follow-up, sharp as a blade. Make sure the gate camera gets this. We'll need it for the petition. The judge's face changed first. Then the court reporter's fingers paused on the keys. Even the bailiff shifted his weight. Eleanor kept going, clip after clip, conversation after conversation, each one more damning than the last. When she reached the forged signatures and the $47,000 unauthorized transfer, Harlan tried to object on technical grounds. Judge Hayes shut him down with a single raised hand. Counselor, I suggest you let the evidence speak before you interrupt it again. By the time the morning session ended, Victor's face had gone from smug to ashen. Kendra kept touching her throat as if the air had grown too thin. The judge ordered a 2-week continuance for full forensic review and instructed both parties to submit any additional documentation. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without setting an alarm. I dreamed of Robert sitting on the edge of our old bed, smiling the way he used to when he knew I was about to win an argument. You always were the patient one, Maggie, he whispered in the dream. But even patience has a closing bell. I woke up smiling. During the continuance, Victor tried one last Hail Mary. He showed up at the motel where I was still staying, still playing the part, just in case. He brought flowers and a rehearsed speech about how worried they had been and how they wanted to take care of me now. I let him talk for exactly 90 seconds, then pointed to the small camera on the dresser that was recording the entire visit. Victor, I said quietly, the only thing you ever took care of was the balance in my checking account. Please leave. He left. The flowers stayed on the table like a cheap apology no one wanted. The final hearing was brutal and beautiful. Their side collapsed under cross-examination. The paid psychiatrist admitted he had been given only the edited videos. The trust attorney confirmed the protective clause had been drafted precisely for situations like this. The forensic accountant laid out the paper trail of forged documents in excruciating detail. When Eleanor played the final clip, Victor and Kendra toasting with the $900 wine while laughing about my imminent legal death, Judge Hayes actually removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. I have seen a lot in 32 years on this bench, she said slowly. But this level of calculated cruelty, wrapped in the language of concern, is rare. She ruled without leaving the bench. Guardianship denied in full. Financial exploitation established by clear and convincing evidence. The $5 million trust was immediately severed from Victor and Kendra. The funds were redirected to the newly created Robert Ellis Memorial Foundation, whose charter explicitly bars any blood relative who has been found civilly or criminally liable for elder exploitation. Restitution of the $1,872,400 plus interest and legal fees was ordered, payable within 18 months or subject to wage garnishment and lien on all real property. A lifetime restraining order was entered. Any contact, direct or indirect, would result in immediate arrest. When the gavel fell, the sound rang like a starting gun for the rest of my life. Victor stood up so fast his chair scraped backward. Mom, you can't do this! The bailiff moved forward. Judge Hayes cut him off with one look. Mr. Ellis, the court has done this. You are dismissed. Kendra started crying, real tears this time, the kind that come when the last golden goose has flown away and taken the nest with it. I didn't look back as I walked out. Outside on the courthouse steps, Eleanor handed me a thick folder. Everything's signed, the foundation papers, the new will. The condo closing is next Tuesday. You're officially unreachable. I took the folder and felt its weight like freedom. Thank you, I said. She smiled. Go live, Margaret. Loudly. I did. I moved into the small oceanfront condo I had bought under a trust 3 months earlier, the one they never knew existed. I wake to the sound of waves instead of urgent voicemails. I drink coffee without calculating how much I can spare for someone else's mortgage. I read books I always meant to read. I volunteer at the foundation 3 mornings a week, helping older women learn how to read their own bank statements and spot the early signs of financial grooming. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. I tell them the truth. I don't regret the money I gave for 12 years. I regret the years I spent believing that love could be purchased with silence and signed checks. Victor and Kendra tried to appeal. The appellate court denied them in under 6 weeks. The restitution clock is ticking. Their house is already listed. The market is soft. Last I heard, they were downsizing to a townhome they can barely afford. I don't check often. I have new numbers to watch now. Scholarship applications, foundation growth, the slow, steady rise of my own quiet fortune. And every evening when the sun slips into the Pacific, I raise a single glass of the same $900 wine they once toasted with and say the same 4 words I finally earned the right to speak. This one's for me. The days after the first hearing were not quiet. They were surgical. I stayed in the motel a few more nights, not because I had to, but because I wanted every second of their panic recorded. Each evening, I walked the same stretch of sidewalk with the soggy cardboard sign. Each evening, their security cameras caught me. Each evening, Victor or Kendra, or both, stood behind the tall iron gate and watched me like I was a stray dog that refused to die. On the 4th night of the continuance, I heard Kendra's voice carry across the driveway while I pretended to adjust my sign. She's still out there. This is perfect. The more she does this, the stronger our case gets. The lawyer says judges hate when old people make scenes in public. It screams instability. Victor answered, lower but still clear on the hidden mic clipped inside my coat. Just make sure the investigator gets fresh footage tomorrow. We need to show she's deteriorating fast. Once the court appoints us conservators, we sell the trust assets immediately. That $5 million will cover the house, the kids' college, and that yacht we looked at in Miami. She'll never even know it's gone. I stood there in the drizzle, letting the rain soak the cardboard until the words, homeless, please help, ran like black tears. Inside my chest, something settled into place. Not rage, not grief, just the clean, cold certainty of a ledger finally balancing. I had given them 12 years. They had given me 10 days of truth. That was enough. The next morning, I checked out of the motel, drove straight to Eleanor's office, and handed her the latest batch of recordings. She listened to the yacht conversation without expression, then slid a fresh affidavit across the desk. Sign here. We're adding criminal referral language. Elder financial exploitation is a felony in this state. We're not just taking the trust away. We're building a file the DA can use if they want it, I signed. While the court waited for the forensic audit, Victor and Kendra moved faster than I expected. They hired a private investigator to follow me. They leaked carefully edited clips of me with the sign to a local Concerned Citizens Facebook group. They even had the twins write handwritten letters to the judge claiming, Grandma isn't herself anymore and we're scared for her. Eleanor countered with precision. She subpoenaed their bank records, their credit card statements, and every wire transfer I had ever made. She deposed the trust attorney, who confirmed that Victor had called him 3 times in the last month, asking how quickly the incapacity clause could be triggered. She obtained the forged signature reports from the forensic document examiner, 4 separate documents where my name had been copied with amateur precision. The numbers told the story better than any witness. $1,872,400 transferred. $47,000 in forged withdrawals from the joint account. $218,000 in gifts that were actually used to pay their credit card minimums while they kept spending. And the crown jewel? A $5 million irrevocable trust sitting in the wings, waiting for the day I was declared legally dead while still breathing. On the morning of the second hearing, the courtroom felt smaller. More press had shown up. Local news had caught wind of wealthy widow versus greedy son. Victor and Kendra arrived looking polished but hollow. The twins were not with them this time. Probably too damaging to parade children in front of cameras when the story was turning. Judge Hayes took the bench and went straight to business. Counsel for the petitioners, you may call your next witness. Harlan stood, already sweating. Your Honor, we call Dr. Philip Grant to testify on the respondent's mental status. The psychiatrist they had paid walked to the stand looking confident, until Eleanor's cross-examination began. Dr. Grant, how many hours did you spend with Mrs. Ellis prior to forming your diagnosis? None, but I reviewed extensive video evidence. Video evidence you received from the petitioners, correct? Yes, but... And you were told the petitioner's theory before viewing it? The doctor hesitated. In general terms... Eleanor played the unedited driveway clip again, then the speakerphone clip, then the yacht toast. The doctor's face went pale. He began qualifying every previous statement. By the time he stepped down, the word biased hung in the air like smoke. Then Eleanor called our forensic accountant, Mr. Daniel Soto. He was a small, precise man with wire-rimmed glasses and the demeanor of a surgeon. He placed printed spreadsheets on the screen for the entire courtroom to see. Over 12 years, Mrs. Ellis transferred $1,872,400 to her son and daughter-in-law. Of that amount, $1,214,600 went directly to luxury expenditures, credit card payoffs, and real estate upgrades that were never repaid. In addition, 4 documents bearing Mrs. Ellis's purported signature were examined and found to be forgeries. The most recent forgery occurred 11 days ago, after Mrs. Ellis had already informed the family she was in financial distress. That withdrawal was $47,000 from a joint account. Victor shifted so violently his chair creaked. Soto continued without mercy. The pattern is consistent with systematic financial grooming and exploitation. The petitioners repeatedly created artificial emergencies, pressured Mrs. Ellis for funds, then distanced themselves emotionally once the money cleared. Harlan tried to object. Judge Hayes overruled him before he finished the sentence. Eleanor saved the best for last. She played the final recording, the one from the night Victor and Kendra toasted with the $900 wine. Kendra's voice, bright and cruel. Once she's declared incompetent, the trust money is ours to manage. She won't even notice. She's already half gone anyway. Victor's laugh. To freedom. The courtroom was silent except for the soft whir of the recording equipment. Judge Hayes looked at Victor and Kendra for a long moment. Mr. Ellis, Mrs. Ellis, would either of you like to explain these statements to the court? Kendra started crying again. Victor opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Your Honor, that was private conversation. Taken out of context. We were stressed. We love my mother. Love, Judge Hayes repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it spoiled. Interesting definition. She turned to me. Mrs. Ellis, you staged this situation. You allowed yourself to be filmed in humiliating circumstances. Why? I stood slowly. My voice was steady, almost conversational. Because for 12 years, I believed that if I gave enough, I would eventually be loved for something other than my checkbook. When I finally stopped writing checks, they stopped pretending. I needed to know exactly how deep the pretense went. The recordings and the bank records answered that question more clearly than any conversation ever could. I looked directly at Victor for the first time since the hearing began. You called me an old leech. You laughed while security walked me off your property like I was trash. You planned to have me declared incompetent so you could take the $5 million your father left for my security. I simply gave you the opportunity to show the court who you really are. Victor's face was gray. Judge Hayes leaned forward. I have reviewed the forensic reports, the audio evidence, and the trust documents. The court finds, by clear and convincing evidence, that Victor Ellis and Kendra Ellis have engaged in financial exploitation of an elder. The petition for guardianship and conservatorship is denied in its entirety. The $5 million trust is severed from the petitioners. The assets will be redirected immediately to the Robert Ellis Memorial Foundation, whose charter prohibits any distribution to blood relatives found liable for elder exploitation. Restitution in the amount of $1,872,400 plus accrued interest and attorney fees is ordered, due within 18 months. Failure to pay will result in liens on all real and personal property owned by the petitioners. A permanent restraining order is entered. Any contact with Mrs. Margaret Ellis, direct or indirect, will be treated as contempt of court and may result in incarceration. She brought the gavel down once, sharp and final. The sound cracked through the room like a starter pistol. Victor tried to stand. The bailiff moved forward. Kendra covered her face with both hands, mascara running in perfect black rivers. I didn't wait for them to be escorted out. I gathered my purse, nodded once to Eleanor, and walked out of the courtroom into the bright April light. Outside, the ocean air tasted clean for the first time in years. 2 weeks later, the foundation was officially launched. I sat at a small table in the foundation office, signing the last paperwork while the executive director, a sharp woman in her 50s who had survived her own family's financial abuse, watched with quiet respect. "You know they're already trying to spin this on social media," she said gently, "calling you vindictive, saying you abandoned your own grandchildren." I smiled, small and calm. "Let them. The bank records are public now. The recordings are sealed, but the judge's order is not. Truth has better legs than lies." I signed the final page and slid it across the table. The Foundation's first scholarship cycle would open in September. The criteria were simple. Applicants must demonstrate financial responsibility, understanding of elder rights, and a commitment to protecting vulnerable family members from exploitation. No blood relatives of mine would ever be eligible. That clause was ironclad. I moved into the Ocean View condo the following Tuesday. The closing was quiet, just me, the realtor, and Eleanor as witness. When I turned the key and stepped inside, the only sound was the distant crash of waves and my own steady breathing. No ringing phone, no urgent texts, no carefully worded requests disguised as love. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. Each item felt heavier with meaning because it was chosen only for me. On the third evening, a certified letter arrived at Victor and Kendra's address. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream stationery with 4 lines typed in clean black ink. "You wanted me gone. You laughed while security walked me away. You planned my legal death for $5 million. Congratulations. I'm gone. And so is every dollar you thought was yours." No signature. None was needed. I never sent another word. Some nights I still walk the balcony with a glass of that same $900 wine. I raise it toward the dark horizon and speak the only toast that matters anymore. This one's for me. The waves answer back, steady and indifferent. And for the first time in 12 years, the sound feels exactly right. The restitution clock started ticking the moment Judge Hayes brought the gavel down. 18 months to repay $1,872,400 plus 8.5% interest and $187,000 in attorney fees. That was the number that finally made Victor and Kendra understand gravity. They tried everything. First came the frantic calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them ring straight to voicemail. Each message was carefully saved and forwarded to Eleanor. "Mom, this is crazy. We're family. Call me so we can work this out like adults." "Margaret, please. The kids are asking about you. Don't punish them for our mistakes." Then the handwritten letters delivered by courier. Expensive cream envelopes with Victor's careful handwriting. I opened none of them. Eleanor's paralegal logged every delivery, photographed the unopened envelopes, and added them to the contempt file. When the ignoring didn't work, they tried public pressure. A carefully worded post appeared on Kendra's private Facebook, the one with 1,400 close friends. It spoke of a heartbreaking family rift, elder confusion, and the pain of watching a once loving mother turn cold. Mutual friends began tagging me, sending concerned messages. I screenshotted every one and forwarded it to Eleanor with the same note: "Add to harassment log." The judge noticed. Within 10 days of the final order, Victor and Kendra were back in court on an emergency motion claiming undue hardship and asking for the restitution schedule to be extended or reduced. Judge Hayes was not amused. She looked at their attorney over the top of her glasses. Mr. Harlan, your clients had 12 years of undue hardship relief courtesy of Mrs. Ellis's checkbook. The court is not inclined to grant them more. She denied the motion and added a warning. Any further attempts to contact Mrs. Ellis or influence public opinion about the case would be considered willful violation of the restraining order. That same afternoon, their house went on the market. I drove past it once, slowly, just to see. The for sale sign looked almost embarrassed in the perfectly manicured lawn I had helped pay to maintain. A luxury SUV, the one I had financed, sat in the driveway with a price sticker already taped to the window. Victor was loading boxes into a rented U-Haul, while Kendra stood on the porch arguing with a realtor on the phone. Neither of them saw me. I didn't stop. The foundation office became my new rhythm. 3 mornings a week, I sat at a plain oak desk reviewing scholarship applications from young women and men who wanted to learn how to protect their aging parents. Their essays were raw, stories of parents drained dry, grandparents hidden in nursing homes while children fought over the house. I read every one. I approved every one that showed genuine understanding. The first checks went out in September, $15,000 each to 6 students. None of them would ever know my name. That was the point. One Thursday afternoon in late October, Eleanor called me into her office. Margaret, we have a problem and an opportunity. She slid a new document across the desk. It was a motion filed by Victor's new attorney, a cheaper one this time, asking the court to reconsider the trust redirection on grounds that the disinheritance clause was ambiguous and that family reconciliation was still possible. Attached were affidavits from the twins, now 14, claiming they missed their grandmother and were traumatized by the family separation. Eleanor watched me carefully. They're using the children. Classic move. I read the affidavits twice. The language was too adult, too polished. Kendra's handwriting bled through every carefully chosen phrase. I looked up at Eleanor. How do we bury this? She smiled the way a surgeon smiles before the first cut. We file our response with the full forensic package, plus new evidence. Last week, Victor attempted to access the Foundation's public filings through a shell LLC. We caught it. Bank security flagged the IP address. It traces straight back to the extended stay hotel they're living in now. She slid another folder over. Inside were fresh bank records showing Victor had tried, and failed, to open new lines of credit using my name as a reference, even after the restraining order. Contempt hearing is scheduled for November 12th, she said. We can ask for jail time if you want it. I thought about it for a long moment. The old Margaret would have softened, would have worried about the twins seeing their father in handcuffs. The new Margaret weighed the ledger. No jail, I said finally, but I want the full restitution enforced. And I want a court order requiring them to sell every asset they still own in my name or purchase with my funds, including the house. Eleanor nodded once. Done. The contempt hearing was short and merciless. Victor stood before the judge in a suit that no longer fit quite right. Kendra sat behind him, eyes red but dry. Their new attorney tried to argue financial hardship and parental love. Judge Hayes cut him off after 3 sentences. Mr. Ellis, you had 12 years of your mother's love expressed in 7-figure transfers. You repaid that love by forging her signature, planning her legal incapacitation, and attempting to access protected foundation funds after a clear restraining order. The court is not moved by your sudden claims of hardship. She ruled from the bench again. Full restitution schedule would stand. Any missed payment would trigger immediate lien enforcement on all remaining assets. The house sale proceeds would be applied directly to the judgment. Any further contact attempts, including using the grandchildren as proxies, would result in 30 days incarceration for civil contempt. Victor's shoulders actually sagged when the gavel fell. As they walked out, Kendra glanced at me for half a second. The look in her eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to fear. The realization that the walking ATM had finally disconnected and taken the entire vault with it. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just the quiet satisfaction of a balance sheet finally reconciled. The house sold in December for $2.65 million, almost $150,000 less than they had hoped. After the mortgage, liens, and realtor fees, Victor and Kendra cleared roughly $380,000. Every cent went straight to the restitution account. The court clerk sent me a confirmation letter with the wire receipt. I framed it and hung it in the foundation office under a small brass plate that read simply, Lesson 1. By February, the twins were enrolled in public school. Victor took a sales job at a mid-tier car dealership. Kendra started working part-time at a boutique that sold overpriced yoga clothes. Their social media went dark. The country club membership lapsed. The private tennis lessons for the boys ended. I heard these details secondhand, through Eleanor's updates and the occasional foundation volunteer who still moved in those circles. I never asked for the information. I simply listened when it arrived, then filed it away like any other closed transaction. In March, I turned 69. I celebrated alone on my balcony with a single slice of lemon cake and a glass of champagne that cost $12 at the grocery store. No $900 bottles anymore. I didn't need them. The ocean didn't care what the label said. That night, I wrote the final entry in the old ledger I'd kept for 12 years. Total given, $1,872,400. Total recovered through judgment, $1,872,400 plus interest. Total emotional cost, 12 years of silence. Final balance, 0. I closed the book, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it onto the flames. The leather cover curled, the pages blackened, and 12 years of careful handwriting disappeared into clean white ash. The next morning, I opened a new ledger, smaller, leather-bound, with fresh, blank pages. On the first line, I wrote today's date and a single entry. Amount spent on self, $0. Purpose, breathing freely. Then I closed it and went for a long walk on the beach. The sand was cold under my bare feet. The waves rolled in steady and indifferent. Somewhere behind me, in a cheaper part of town, Victor and Kendra were waking up to alarm clocks and budgets and the permanent knowledge that the golden goose had not only flown away, it had rewritten the entire will mid-flight. I kept walking until the sun warmed my face. For the first time in more than a decade, every step I took was paid for by money that belonged only to me. And that, I decided, was the sweetest revenge of all. The contempt hearing in November had been the turning point, but the real final battle came in the quiet, air-conditioned conference room of the trust administrator's office on a gray Tuesday in February. I arrived early, dressed in the same navy suit I had worn the first day of court. Eleanor sat on my left, the trust administrator, a precise woman named Ms. Carolyn Reed, on the other side of the long mahogany table. 2 boxes of documents waited in the center. One labeled Ellis Trust Original, the other labeled Ellis Trust Modified. Victor and Kendra arrived 10 minutes late, both looking thinner, their clothes no longer tailored. Victor's eyes had the permanent squint of someone who now checked prices before ordering coffee. Kendra's manicure was chipped. They brought their new, cheaper attorney, a nervous man in an off-the-rack suit who kept shuffling papers as if volume could replace quality. Ms. Reed opened the meeting with clinical politeness. Per the court order of April 11, the Robert Ellis Family Trust has been severed. Today, we execute the final redirection of all assets. $5 million, plus accrued interest, will be transferred within 48 hours to the Robert Ellis Memorial Foundation. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, you are here as former named beneficiaries to witness the execution and to receive formal notice of permanent disinheritance. Victor's jaw tightened. We still believe the clause is ambiguous. My father never intended... Eleanor slid a single page across the table before he could finish. Paragraph 7.3, drafted by your father's own attorney in 2012 and reviewed by 3 independent counsel. Any beneficiary who engages in financial exploitation, undue influence, or attempts to accelerate distribution through claims of incapacity against the grantor shall be deemed to have predeceased the grantor for all distribution purposes. Your father was very clear, Mr. Ellis. He saw what money could do to family. He built the fence before the wolves arrived. Kendra tried a different angle, voice soft and trembling, the same tone she used when she needed another $25,000 for emergencies. Margaret, please. The boys keep asking why they can't see Grandma. They're innocent in all this. At least let us keep something for their college. They're your blood. I looked at her for a long moment. The same woman who had once called me the old leech now wanted me to remember blood. Blood, I said quietly, didn't stop you from forging my signature on 4 documents. Blood didn't stop you from planning to have me declared incompetent so you could sell everything I owned while I was still breathing. Blood apparently only mattered when the checks cleared. I turned to Ms. Reed. Please proceed with the transfer. The administrator nodded once and began the formal reading. Effective immediately, Victor Robert Ellis and Kendra Marie Ellis are removed as beneficiaries in all respects. The full corpus of the trust, $5 million principal, plus $214,000 in accrued interest, is hereby irrevocably transferred to the Robert Ellis Memorial Foundation for the advancement of financial literacy and elder protection. No further distributions, loans, or advances of any kind shall ever be made to the former beneficiaries or their descendants under any circumstances. Victor's hands clenched on the table until his knuckles went white. Kendra stared at the polished wood as if she could will the money back into existence. The attorney tried one last desperate objection. We request a 30-day stay pending appeal. Denied, Ms. Reed said before Eleanor could even speak. The court order was clear. Appeals on this matter have already been exhausted. The transfer will occur at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. You will receive formal confirmation by certified mail. Silence settled over the room like heavy snow. I stood up slowly. There is one more thing. I reached into my briefcase and removed a single envelope, plain white, no return address. I slid it across the table toward Victor and Kendra. They didn't touch it. Open it, I said. Victor finally did, fingers shaking slightly. Inside was the same cream stationery I had used before. 4 lines, typed in the same clean font. You wanted me gone. You laughed while security walked me away like trash. You planned my legal death for $5 million. Congratulations. I'm gone, and so is every dollar you thought was yours. No signature, none needed. Kendra's breath hitched. Victor looked up at me, and for the first time since he was a little boy, I saw something raw in his eyes. Not love, not remorse, but the stunned realization that the woman he had spent 12 years draining had finally drained him of every illusion. I didn't wait for them to speak. I turned to Ms. Reed. Thank you for your professionalism. Then to Eleanor. I'll see you at the foundation lunch next week. I walked out without looking back. The next morning at 10:07 a.m., my phone pinged with a secure notification from the trust administrator. Transfer complete. $5,214,000 now resides in the Robert Ellis Memorial Foundation operating account. Former beneficiaries have been formally notified and removed from all records. I set the phone down on the balcony table, picked up my $12 cup of coffee, and watched the waves roll in. No cheering. No dramatic music. Just the quiet click of final numbers balancing. Later that week, the foundation held its first public scholarship ceremony. 6 young adults, 3 women, 3 men, stood on a small stage and spoke about why protecting elders mattered. One young woman, 22 years old, told the room how her grandmother had been moved into a substandard nursing home while her uncle drained the checking account. Her voice cracked when she said, I want to make sure no one else has to watch their family become strangers over money. I sat in the back row, anonymous in a simple gray dress, and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for 12 years. After the ceremony, the foundation director introduced me privately to the scholars as our anonymous founding donor. None of them knew my full story. They didn't need to. They only needed to know the rules had changed. That evening, I sat on my balcony again, a light breeze carrying the smell of salt and new beginnings. I opened the new ledger, the small one with blank pages, and wrote today's final entry. Trust redirected, $5,214,000. Purpose, protecting those who come after me from what was done to me. Emotional ledger, closed. I closed the book and set it aside. Somewhere across town, Victor and Kendra were probably arguing over which bills to pay first with the last scraps of their settlement. The twins were doing homework in a smaller house with thinner walls. The country club had already mailed their cancellation notice. I poured myself one more small glass of the cheap champagne and raised it toward the dark ocean. To the walking ATM, I said softly. She finally walked away. The waves answered with their steady rhythm, indifferent, clean, and entirely mine. I slept that night without dreams of ringing phones or urgent transfers. For the first time in 12 years, the silence in my home was not emptiness. It was peace. And peace, I had learned, costs exactly what you are finally willing to stop paying everyone else. The restitution machine kept grinding long after the trust money vanished. By late March, Victor and Kendra had sold the house for $2.65 million. After the bank took its cut, after the liens from my judgment were satisfied, after realtor fees and back taxes, they walked away with $312,000 in cash. The court ordered every cent applied directly to the balance. The clerk sent me the wire confirmation on a Wednesday morning. I opened the email on my balcony, took a sip of coffee, and watched the number drop on their ledger from $1,872,400 to $1,560,400 remaining. They still owed me more than $1 million. They tried to negotiate again. Their new attorney sent a formal letter proposing monthly payments of $2,500 in light of their reduced circumstances and parental responsibilities. Eleanor replied with a single sentence. The court order is not a suggestion. Pay or face asset seizure. So they paid what they could. Victor's car dealership salary was garnished at 25%. Kendra's part-time boutique job sent another $800 a month. Every paycheck stub landed on Eleanor's desk. Every missed payment triggered another court filing. The interest kept ticking, $11,200 every 30 days. The balance refused to shrink fast enough for their comfort. In April, they defaulted on the first payment after the house sale. The court issued an order freezing their remaining bank accounts and placing a lien on the townhome they had downsized into. Victor called my old number from a blocked line at 2:17 a.m. I let it ring, recorded the voicemail, and forwarded it to Eleanor at sunrise. Mom, please, we're drowning here. The boys are sharing a room the size of a closet. Kendra hasn't slept in weeks. Just give us some breathing room. We're still family. Family. The word tasted like rust now. Eleanor filed for civil contempt the same day. The hearing was set for May 8. I didn't attend. I didn't need to watch them beg in public again. Eleanor sent me the transcript instead. Victor testified first. He spoke about mistakes and stress and not realizing how much Mom had sacrificed. He cried on the stand, real tears this time, the kind that come when the last credit card is declined. Kendra followed, voice hoarse, claiming the forged signatures were just paperwork shortcuts, and that they had always intended to repay me when things stabilized. Judge Hayes listened without expression. When both had finished, she spoke for less than 2 minutes. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, you had 12 years of breathing room, financed by your mother's retirement. The court will not rewrite mathematics to accommodate your lifestyle. The full restitution schedule stands. Any further default will result in the sale of your current residence at sheriff's auction, with proceeds applied directly to the judgment. You are also ordered to provide monthly financial affidavits under penalty of perjury. Failure to do so will be treated as contempt. She set the next review hearing for August. The balance dropped another $47,000 that month, then $52,000 the next. The interest kept compounding like a quiet, relentless accountant. I never called them. I never sent another letter. I simply let the law do what I had once done for free, collect what was owed. In June, the foundation held its second scholarship ceremony. 12 students this time. One young man stood at the podium and spoke about watching his grandfather lose his house to a daughter who convinced him to sign over the deed for tax reasons. His voice shook when he said, "I'm studying elder law, so no one else has to choose between love and survival." I sat in the back row again, anonymous, and felt the ledger inside me balance a little more. That same week, Eleanor called with an update. Victor tried to declare bankruptcy last month. The court denied it. Elder restitution judgments are non-dischargeable. They also found he attempted to hide $18,000 in a friend's account. Additional contempt charges filed. Hearing in July. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't feel joy. I felt the same calm I felt when I finally canceled the automatic transfers years ago. The clean click of a door locking behind me. July brought the sheriff's notice. Their townhome was scheduled for auction if the August payment was missed. Victor sold his last watch, the Rolex I had bought him for his 40th, on Craigslist for $9,200. Kendra sold her designer bags in batches. Every dollar scraped together went straight to the judgment. The August payment cleared on the 29th, $63,400. The balance now stood at $1,184,000. They were still drowning, but the water was no longer over their heads. It was at their chins. I turned 70 in September. I celebrated with a quiet dinner on the balcony. Grilled salmon, a small salad, and one glass of $12 champagne. No guests, no phone calls, just the ocean and the sound of my own steady breathing. That night, I opened the small ledger again and wrote, "Restitution received this year, $688,000. Remaining balance owed, $1,184,000. My current net worth, personal accounts only, $3,412,000. Emotional balance, fully reconciled." I closed the book and set it on the table beside the empty glass. Somewhere in a 3-bedroom townhome with thin walls, Victor and Kendra were probably arguing about which bill to pay first, while the twins tried to sleep through the raised voices. The private school was long gone. The vacations were memories. The future they had counted on, the $5 million safety net, had been redirected to strangers who would use it to protect other grandparents from people exactly like them. I stood up, walked to the railing, and looked out at the dark water. I had given them 12 years of my life in dollars and silence. They had given me back the truth in 10 cold days on a sidewalk with a cardboard sign. The exchange was finally even. I raised the empty glass toward the horizon one last time. "To the old leech," I whispered. She finally crawled away and took the entire vault with her. The waves kept rolling in, steady and clean. I went inside, turned off the lights, and slept without dreams of ringing phones. Tomorrow, the foundation would open another scholarship cycle. Tomorrow, Victor and Kendra would wake up to another garnishment notice. And tomorrow, for the first time in 70 years, every single choice I made would be paid for with money that no one could ever take back. That was the only revenge I needed. The final hearing was scheduled for the second week of October, almost exactly 18 months after I first stood on their driveway with the soggy cardboard sign. By then, the numbers had become brutally simple. Restitution still owed, $1,184,000. Interest accrued since last payment, $68,900. Total due before the hearing, $1,252,900. Victor and Kendra had sold everything that still carried my fingerprints. The last Rolex, the matching luggage set, Kendra's diamond tennis bracelet, even the twins' gaming consoles bought with my money 3 Christmases earlier. Every penny had gone into the judgment account, yet the balance refused to die fast enough. They arrived at the courthouse looking like people who had been slowly bled dry in public. Victor's suit hung loose on his shoulders. Kendra's hair had lost its salon sheen. Gray roots showed at the temples. Their attorney carried a thinner briefcase and the defeated posture of a man who had run out of arguments. I sat in the front row beside Eleanor, wearing the same navy suit that had become my courtroom armor. I carried no notes. The ledger was already closed in my mind. Judge Hayes entered exactly on time. She did not waste words. This is the final review hearing on the restitution order issued April 11th of last year. Mr. Ellis, Mrs. Ellis, you have paid $688,000 toward the principal. You remain in default on $1,252,900 inclusive of interest and fees. The court has reviewed your latest financial affidavits. Explain why this court should not order the immediate sale of your remaining residence at sheriff's auction. Their attorney stood first, voice already cracking. Your Honor, my clients have made good faith efforts under extreme hardship. They have liquidated every non-essential asset. Their children have been removed from private activities. They are living paycheck to paycheck. Further enforcement will render them homeless. Judge Hayes looked at the affidavits, then at Victor and Kendra. Homeless, she repeated flatly. Interesting choice of word. Mrs. Ellis once stood on your driveway holding a cardboard sign that read exactly that. You responded by calling security and laughing. Today you asked this court for the mercy you refused to show her. She turned the page. Additionally, the court notes 2 new violations. First, Mr. Ellis attempted to open a new credit card using his mother's former address as a reference 2 months ago. Second, Mrs. Ellis posted on a private Facebook group soliciting prayers for our family during this difficult legal battle with my mother-in-law, which violates the spirit and letter of the permanent restraining order. Both actions constitute contempt. Kendra's shoulders started to shake. Victor stared at the table like a man watching his own grave being dug. The judge continued without raising her voice. The court finds continued willful noncompliance. The remaining townhome will be listed for sheriff's sale within 30 days. All net proceeds after the mortgage will be applied directly to the judgment. Any shortfall will result in wage garnishment continuing at 25% for Mr. Ellis and 15% for Mrs. Ellis until the balance reaches 0. A final contempt sanction of $25,000 is imposed, payable immediately from any remaining liquid assets. She paused, letting the numbers settle like stones. Furthermore, the Robert Ellis Memorial Foundation has submitted a request to receive any future surplus funds should the judgment be satisfied in full before the natural end of the payment schedule. That request is granted. Any overpayment will not be refunded to the Ellis family. It will be redirected to elder protection programs. Victor made a small, choked sound. Judge Hayes looked directly at him. Mr. Ellis, you once told your mother she was not special enough to attend your wedding. Today the court tells you that you are no longer special enough to inherit anything from her lifetime of work. The ledger is closed. This matter is concluded. The gavel fell with a sound like a vault door locking for the last time. I stood up, slowly. Victor and Kendra remained seated, stunned, as the bailiff approached to escort them to the clerk's office for the sale paperwork. I did not speak to them. There was nothing left to say that mathematics and the law had not already said more clearly. Outside on the courthouse steps, the October air felt sharper, cleaner. Eleanor walked beside me, heels clicking in quiet rhythm. "It's over, Margaret," she said. "The last lien will be filed by Friday. Their house goes to auction in 30 days. After that, the garnishment continues until the final dollar is paid. You will never have to see or hear from them again unless they violate the order." I nodded once. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything." She smiled, small and satisfied. "Go live the rest of your life, loudly. You've earned the volume." I drove home along the coast road with the windows down. The ocean glittered under a pale sun. When I pulled into the driveway of the condo, I sat in the car for a long minute, just listening to the waves. Inside, I opened the small ledger one final time. Final court order issued, October 14. Remaining balance transferred to sheriff's sale process, $1,252,900. Anticipated recovery from townhome auction, approximately $420,000. Remaining after auction, to be garnished, $832,900. Foundation to receive any surplus. Confirmed I wrote the last line in. Steady blue ink. Total recovered through judgment and enforcement. $1,872,400, plus all interest and fees. Emotional account. Closed with final balance 0. Then I carried the little book to the fireplace, set it on the grate, and struck a match. The leather cover curled first, the pages blackened and lifted, 12 years of careful handwriting turning to clean white ash that rose and disappeared up the chimney. I watched until every trace was gone. That evening I did something I had not done since Robert died. I called my sister Diana in Chicago, the one I had lost touch with because every conversation had become a financial report about Victor and Kendra. She answered on the second ring, surprised. "Margaret? Is everything all right?" "Everything is finally all right," I said. My voice sounded lighter even to my own ears. "I'd like to come visit for Thanksgiving. No agenda, just us. And I'm paying for the plane ticket myself." Diana was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. The real kind, not the polite one I used to hear when I bragged about how much I was helping the kids. "I'll make your favorite stuffing," she said. "And Margaret, I'm proud of you." I hung up and stood at the balcony railing as the sun slipped into the Pacific. Somewhere in a townhome that would soon belong to someone else, Victor and Kendra were probably staring at the court papers, realizing the last door had just slammed shut. The twins would learn soon enough that the grandmother they had been taught to pity was the same woman who had finally stopped paying for their parents' mistakes. I raised a single glass of the cheap champagne toward the darkening water. "To the woman who finally stopped being anyone's walking ATM," I said quietly. The waves answered with their steady, indifferent rhythm. I drank the glass slowly, savoring every bubble. Then I went inside, turned off the lights, and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman whose ledger was finally, completely, beautifully balanced. The next morning I woke to the sound of the ocean, and the knowledge that every single day from now on would be paid for with money that belonged only to me. No more forged signatures, no more late-night emergency transfers, no more cardboard signs or security escorts. Just Margaret Ellis, 70 years old, finally free. And that freedom tasted better than any $5 million trust fund ever could. I never expected the last chapter to feel this quiet. 18 months after I stood on that driveway with a soggy cardboard sign, the final wire cleared on a cold Thursday in early December. The sheriff's sale of their townhome had brought in $428,000 after fees. Garnishment had pulled another $312,000 from wages and remaining accounts. The last $112,900 arrived as a cashier's check delivered by courier to Eleanor's office. She called me while I was watering the small herb garden on my balcony. "It's done, Margaret. The judgment is satisfied in full. The court has issued the final satisfaction of judgment document. They owe you nothing, not one more cent, not one more signature, not one more conversation." I set the watering can down and looked out at the Pacific. The water was steel gray under low clouds, but the air felt impossibly light. "Thank you," I said simply. "No," Eleanor replied. "Thank you for trusting the process instead of the people. Most never do." I hung up, walked inside, and placed the final court document in the small fireproof box beside the ashes of the old ledger. Then I closed the lid and never opened it again. That afternoon, I drove to the foundation office one last time as the anonymous donor. The director handed me the latest stack of scholarship applications, 23 this cycle. I sat at the plain oak desk and read every single one. A 47-year-old daughter who had watched her mother lose her home to a brother who forged power of attorney papers. A 24-year-old son who had taken night classes in elder law after his grandfather was moved into a substandard facility so his aunt could manage the estate. A 62-year-old woman who had finally said no after 30 years of funding her adult children's temporary crises. Each story carried the same quiet ache I once carried. Each one ended with the same hard-earned line. I want to make sure no one else has to learn this lesson the way I did. I approved every application that showed real understanding. 21 checks would go out before Christmas. None of the recipients would ever know my name. That was the point. The money that had once disappeared into Victor and Kendra's lifestyle was now building fences for people who still had time to protect themselves. On the drive home, I stopped at the small cafe overlooking the water and ordered a single slice of lemon cake and a cup of coffee. No one recognized me. No one asked for anything. I sat by the window and watched the waves for 40 uninterrupted minutes. That night, I wrote the very last entry in the new ledger, the small one that had replaced the old. Date, December 11. Final restitution received, $1,252,900, including all interest and fees. Total recovered, $1,872,400 plus full interest. Money redirected to foundation, $5,214,000. Current personal net worth, all accounts, no family obligations, $4,187,000. Status of Victor and Kendra Ellis. Permanently removed from all records and financial life. Emotional ledger. Closed. Balance, 0. I closed the book, carried it to the fireplace, and set it on the grate beside the ashes of the first one. One match. The leather curled, the pages lifted, and the last 12 years of careful accounting turned to clean white smoke that rose and disappeared into the chimney. I watched until nothing remained but gray ash. Then I did something I had not done since Robert was alive. I opened a bottle of good champagne. Not the $900 kind they once toasted with, but an honest $85 bottle I had chosen for myself, and poured one glass. I carried it to the balcony, wrapped a light shawl around my shoulders, and stood at the railing as the December wind moved across the water. Somewhere, in whatever smaller place they had found after the townhome sold, Victor and Kendra were probably staring at empty bank statements and court papers that said, "Satisfaction of judgment, paid in full." The twins were older now, old enough to ask questions their parents could no longer answer with credit cards and lies. Old enough to learn that the grandmother they had been taught to view as a burden had finally stopped carrying everyone else. I raised the glass toward the dark horizon. "To the woman who finally stopped being anyone's walking ATM," I said softly. She walked away with everything that was ever hers. The ocean answered with its steady, indifferent rhythm. No applause, no drama. Just the clean sound of water doing what water does. Moving forward, erasing footprints, leaving the shore new again every morning. I drank the champagne slowly, tasting every bubble. Then I went inside, turned off the lights, and slept the deep, dreamless sleep that only comes when every account is settled and every door is locked from the inside. The next morning I woke before dawn, made coffee, and sat on the balcony as the sky turned pink over the water. My phone stayed silent. No urgent texts, no blocked numbers, no carefully worded messages pretending to be love. Just the sound of waves and the quiet knowledge that today, like every day from now on, every choice I made would be paid for with money that belonged only to me. I had given 12 years to people who saw me as a resource. I had taken 18 months to take it all back, every dollar, every illusion, every future they thought they owned. And in the end, the revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple. It was final. It was me, 70 years old, standing on my own balcony with my own coffee, breathing air that no one could ever bill me for again. I smiled at the ocean, small and calm. Then I stood up, went inside, and started planning the quiet life I had postponed for 12 long years. No more forged signatures, no more emergency transfers, no more cardboard signs, just Margaret Ellis. Finally, completely, beautifully free. And that freedom tasted better than any $5 million trust fund ever could.